Welcome back to GTD. We are past the Daytona 500 now, and William Byron is your back-to-back winner of the apparently 8 hours of Great American Race now. Thank you, Rain. Happens literally every year now.
Austin Cindric didn't win that 500?
I know, it's crazy.
Chase Elliott didn't win the 500?
I know.
Ryan Blaney didn't win the 500?
Kyle Busch didn't win the 500.
Well, he wasn't as dominant as some of the other cars we've talked about. But yeah, Byron, two-time winner. He's kind of won both of them in very, very similar ways.
Yeah.
We'll get into that. But we'll start there, and then we'll talk about the racing, some of the fuel mileage stuff, some of the things the drivers have come out and said. But let's start with how Byron put himself in position to ultimately win his second Daytona 500.
Put himself in position by running ninth.
Yeah. But so they go to a green-white checkered. There's a big wreck, so they go to a green-white checkered. NASCAR overtime, if you're unfamiliar with the term green-white checkered and you're a newer fan. And I knew they were going to wreck. I knew it wasn't going to come down to two green laps. They were two green laps, but just because, first of all, NASCAR not throwing the caution. First time I've seen
Before even that.
in a while.
Before that. Riley Herbst for not slamming it into the wall after spinning through the wet grass. Yeah. Massive kudos to Riley Herbst on that one, because if he hits the wall, that's a caution all day.
Right, but NASCAR not throwing the caution, I think is a huge deal for the sport if they continue to do that. And
but do it consistently.
Right.
I still get fans complaining that they threw a caution because they didn't in the Xfinity race. They did in the Xfinity race, they did in the duels, and they did in the truck race, obviously, with Parker Kligerman. So I think that you're going to have to figure out how to do it consistently. I personally like the way they did it on Sunday better. I think that's how it should be, because none of those cars wrecking in turn 3 affects anyone going to the line, in my opinion.
I agree.
So,
but anyways, on to the wreck itself and how Byron was just able to squeeze by. Do you want to break it down?
Yeah, so basically you have Denny Hamlin up near the front, right at the end of the Daytona 500, going for number 4, and Cole Custer decides he is in a bulldozer and not a Haas factory team NASCAR, and Briscoe behind him. They all just kind of like, in the backstretch. Yeah. All kind of go down into each other. William Byron and Tyler Reddick are in the outside lane. As everyone wrecks, they manage to just squeak by. Hamlin grazes Reddick on the way through, and then Reddick can't catch up to Byron by the time they get to the line. William Byron wins the Daytona 500, and Jimmy Johnson comes home third. Yay!
Yeah, it's a big deal for the sport. Jimmy Johnson third. Justin Allgaier running a junior motorsport car for Dale Earnhardt Jr., finishing 9th, top 10.
Yeah, I think I speak for everyone, you included, when I say I want more JRM in the Cup Series. I know Dale Jr. does as well.
Yes. Oh, he's been very happy and outspoken, especially today, a little bit last night, but especially today about just how much he wants that to continue and just more of that. And I think he's going to get it. I don't know if it's going to be a charter maybe in the next 2 years, but I do think a charter is in his future as an owner. I don't know, it'll be 1, 2, 3, 4. But I think it's somewhere down the line, maybe not in the immediate future, but I think a Talladega one-off, your Daytona one-offs, your races like that, I would expect to see a JRM car more consistently in the in the field, for the Cup field at least. But yeah, so kudos to those two teams. Legacy didn't look bad as a whole. Eric Jones was making some moves up at the front towards the end.
John Hunter Nemechek very quietly finished 5th as well.
Exactly.
Making it through the back.
A guy who ran well at Daytona last summer. So maybe a name to look out for at these super speedways. But back to the finish, William Byron just squeaking by. You mentioned that. The wreck before that also barely, I think Christopher Bell actually hit him. Christopher Bell got into him a little bit, and he just barely got through. So, I mean, that's the first thing he said when Jamie Little asked him, about winning. He's like, well, you mean luck was on our side. You got to have luck on your side. And he's right. But he's also a talented driver and puts himself in positions.
I think the issue some people are having with this is luck. It feels like it's been solely on William Byron's side the last 2 years. You look at Daytona 2024 and the way he won that one with Chastain and Cindric going, oh no, right at the start-finish line as they came to take the white, winning that one. Now, this where basically the entire field wrecks and seeds part for him to get through to the finish line. And I don't think it's necessarily bad for the sport that William Byron is winning the Daytona 500. I think it's bad for the sport that seemingly the Daytona 500 every year now is either decided under caution. You have the massive rain delays, which I get NASCAR can't do a ton about because it's Florida this time of year, but the finishes under caution and then just the massive wrecks. It feels like every super speedway, the big one isn't something that happens at like 20 to go and then you re-rack them and then maybe some guys wreck coming to the line. It is every year everyone gets taken out, and you either end up with what you got this week or just finish under caution.
Right. And I want to talk about the big one now because I have an interesting take on what I think happened. I want to see if you agree with me on this. Ryan Preece, I'm sure you've seen the videos of him not getting end over end like you typically would see NASCAR.
Did a
just
barrel
kind
roll,
of
basically.
wheeling, popping up, and then just air getting under that. He called it a sheet of plywood, which I think is a perfect way to describe that. That sheet of plywood that just takes it up and flipped it this way this time. But yeah, he was all right. He walked away. Christopher Bell with a hard hit into the outside wall also walked away. He seems to be all right.
Kyle Busch with a hit into the inside wall, and then very mad at NASCAR, which we'll get into in a minute.
But yeah, so this big one, I want to break down how it happened. We had 2 Toyotas on the front row.
Yeah.
And what I noticed with the Toyotas all night, they cannot be pushed.
They can't.
You saw it earlier when Byron and Elliott were tandem on trying to make that third line go. Bubba Wallace pulls out, kills momentum. Not because he wasn't fast enough, just because those Chevys couldn't get behind him and push without him getting super squirrely.
And it's not a Chase Elliott problem because you heard all night Chase Elliott is one of the best pushers in this field.
Him and Cindric together were unbeatable.
Yeah, and then you look, Bubba Wallace hopped that outside lane. It's like they threw a parachute out behind him. Then Christopher Bell, we hadn't seen him much up at the front all night, gets to the front. All of a sudden, you saw down the back, even before the wreck, just all over the place. Denny Hamlin, you saw the last wreck, could not take it down.
There was a camera angle. There's a camera angle of that Ryan Preece wreck right before Christopher Bell turns into the wall. If Christopher Bell had not been turned into the wall, Denny Hamlin was going to be turned into the wall. Yeah. Both of those cars down that backstretch, somebody was about to lose it. So these Toyotas, and they can't push. Not only can they not be pushed, they struggle to push other cars.
Yeah.
And I just think it's something to do with that Toyota Camry body. We saw everyone raged about it when it came out, how pointy it is and this and that. It's pointy, and that's not really what you want. You don't want to tip when you're trying to push a flat surface, at 200 miles an hour.
The first year the Camaro came out in the Cup Series, it got to Daytona. It was like, we can't take a push from the Camaros because it had that pointed nose and people were getting hooked left and right. Yeah. And I think it's not quite that bad, but it's a very similar concept to what you're seeing with these Toyotas right now. And
they've struggled with superspeedway racing since they've
I don't really know
this car.
if there's a way that they can fix that. And I think that's part of the reason you saw Chase Briscoe spend 90% of the race at the back. Jimmy Johnson spend 90% of the race at the back. Christopher Bell spend a ton of the race at the back. Yeah. It's because those guys know if we try to make our way through the field, we're going to cause a wreck.
Yeah. I think it's the body. They haven't done anything on super speedways. I mean, Denny Hamlin's been up at the front, but that's Denny Hamlin. He's gonna, work his way up at the front.
Weirdly, the best super speedway racers I would say recently for Toyota have been John Hunter Nemechek and Bubba Wallace.
Yeah,
those two guys always seem to find their way up to the front of the super speedway.
Exactly, and I mean, Tyler Reddick did have the win last year at Talladega, but once again, that was a weird scenario that put him there. That wasn't him just mowing down the field to get there. But yeah, so we talked about Toyotas. Fords still tend to be the most dominant car. Just drive up to the car in front of them.
Front. It's flat.
Right. But even when they're not pushing, they can just drive up to the car in front of them to be able to push. Chevys, I don't think Chevys are that far behind Ford. I do think it's Chevy, Ford, and then you have a few steps for Toyota at super speedways.
I think the Chevys can, if a Chevy is handling well, it can push just about as well as a Ford. But the issue, I think it's harder for Chevy to find that handling window now, to where the Fords are so good at getting those runs and suctioning right up. But it also doesn't seem like there are any Fords with huge stability problems. Right. Whereas maybe some of the, like you saw with Kyle Larson's car, that thing just would not work all night.
Yeah. But we've talked about manufacturers. Now we didn't get green flag pit stops. So we don't really know how.
Shout out the phantom debris caution.
Yeah. I don't really know how that would have played out. I don't think it would have played out like recent history, and I'm going to get into that. There was not a lot of teamwork between teammates yesterday.
No.
Now, you saw it with the Penske cars because they were up front pretty much the entire race. I know Logano had some issues, but still drove up to the front. Blaney and Cindric were up at the front. But even then, you saw Cindric leave Blaney a lot to go to Elliott or Byron. Mm-hmm. And there was a point in time when Elliott and Cindric and Blaney and Byron were the two leaders of the packs, and you saw a lot they get with their teammate, have their teammate push them out to the lead, and then just go find someone else quickly. And you even saw Blaney in stage 2 push Cindric out, leave him to dry, and then go win the stage win.
Well, I think that has a lot to do with, I talked about this last week before the Daytona 500 with NASCAR's new kind of sporting directions and rules about we will not tolerate any of this manufacturer, buddy, teammate, everyone's going to all work together like this and manipulate race outcomes or stage outcomes. I think that's part of the reason why you see this. And also just Chevy is closer to Ford now, like you mentioned. So the Fords don't think, to have to be successful, we can only work with Fords. And I think that's helped Chevy and Ford a lot. But like you mentioned with the Toyota, I think that's really hurt Toyota.
Yeah.
Because previously Toyota was the one manufacturer where, we don't have as much as Ford or Chevy, so we'll kind of work with everyone. And now that everyone's working with everyone, the Toyotas are kind of left out to dry.
Right. And right before we got the caution about right when the pit window opened at the end of stage 3,
the phantom caution.
Yeah, they were talking about green flag pit stops, talking about Mike Joyce said, this is where you're going to see cars try to get to the inside in line up with manufacturer. I don't think that would have happened. I really think it would have been the bottom line pit and then, go for there. You may have seen a few cars try to get in and out, but you saw how, I don't like talking about track position at a track like Daytona, but you saw how important it was because they were 3 wide the entire race.
Yeah.
Track position was important.
I mean, Penske would have pit together, Gibbs would have pit together, and Hendrick would have pit together, but outside of that, you wouldn't have seen the manufacturer line.
Yeah, it wouldn't have been like it has been in the past. All the Chevys and maybe one Ford, all the Fords, and then Toyotas by themselves, and then they they're spread out for a little bit and regroup. I think it would have been whenever they can get down a pit road with people they trust, not really a logo, just people they trust, and kind of go from there.
Yeah, and you mentioned getting in the fuel window. It's still my one big problem with super speedway racing. I think it's kind of a byproduct of stages still. When you add stages to super speedway racing and you make them the lengths that they are, you're going to end up with this fuel saving problem every single time. And when NASCAR introduced stages like, we'll make them long enough to where they don't affect the fuel and fuel won't come into these stages. Well, what you've done at the super speedways is you've made them run 3 miles an hour until they hit their fuel number, and then they come down, and then they still don't fuel it up all the way, and then they save more fuel to get to the end. And you just end up with this effect of, we have to save fuel and save fuel and save fuel until finally you get to 20 laps to go and everyone goes, okay, now we can race.
Well, you mentioned the fuel mileage racing, and the drivers have been very outspoken about it. They don't like it. I mean, obviously, they're race car drivers. They want to go out there and win. But you also talked earlier about how all these races have come down to just wrecks after wrecks at the end. Mm-hmm. And Denny Hamlin straight up said, it's because we're not allowed to race for the first 95% of the race.
You listen to any radio through these things, the crew chiefs are going, don't go. We have to save. And I can't remember who 60%
it was. Throttle, 65% throttle,
who was
70%
it on the
throttle,
radio
60%
last
throttle.
night? It was one of the Hendrick cars that had to drop back, and he was complaining to his crew chief, let me race. It was either Elliott or Byron.
It was Bowman.
Maybe Bowman,
because it was right when Bowman had gotten to the top 3, racing at the front of the pack.
And then you saw him just drop back, and they played this radio.
They played Kyle Busch radio. They told Busch, hey, I need another lap out of you. And he's like, come on, man.
If I were a driver, I would be telling my crew chief, I'll take the extra seconds for you to get more fuel in this car, and then I can just drive to the front and be fine.
Yeah.
I don't get why that's not the strategy, because I know it's more difficult to come to the front in these cars, but you see guys, when they want to go, look at what Ross Chastain did. When Ross Chastain said, I don't care about fuel saving, I'm going to the front, he got there in 2 seconds. Yep. So if you're a crew chief, why not just fill your driver up to where you know you're good, and then they can just drive to the front anyway? I
think you'll start to see more of that, especially as the drivers get fed up with this. Especially your Denny Hamlin, your Kyle Busch, guys who are veterans who can kind of, carve their own path, if you will. They'll be like, this is what we're doing. I don't care. I'm racing. I'm not doing this. I would rather race up to the front and maybe be if your computer says I'm a lap short, guess what? Joey Logano was 13 laps short last year when he won a race. Out of fuel for 20 laps, won a race. I would rather have the computer say I'm a lap short and figure it out that way than be in the back and get caught up because I'm trying to feel safe.
And even if you are, you have that reserve tank.
Yeah, exactly. But what I'm saying is you don't want to just I'll save back here. Oh, they spun in front of me at Daytona and I can't win now.
That's exactly what happened to Brad Keselowski, because I think Brad had one of the faster cars, was up front for a decent portion of the race, then had to drop back fuel saving. What do you know? Gets caught up in 2 separate wrecks. Right. So it's just a byproduct of super speedway racing right now. And speaking of that,
time out, Micah. We have a caution for debris. We have to stop. We have to re-rack it.
Yeah, that's my bad. But I do want to talk about Kyle Busch.
Yes.
And there's obviously the whole 20 years of trying thing. I picked him to win this race, and as you get down towards the end, he's running third, sitting well in there, and then the big wreck happens, the one where Priest goes up airborne, and Kyle Busch was sent spinning down barely But he did not hit the wall that hard. He said he had 4 flat tires, and he got hooked up to the damaged truck while he was yelling on the radio, just give me a push, just give me a push. Don't let them tow me, don't let them tow me. Safety crew tows him. Now with the new DVP, he should be able to go back out regardless of this. But then he said they towed him to an area where when they started working on the car, they sent it back out. They're like, okay, we can go meet minimum speed now. At this point, the green flag has not waved. So under NASCAR's new DVP, there is no reason Kyle Busch should be parked right now because he should be allowed to go back out and make minimum speed. He said they didn't have too much damage. He felt like they could have still competed at that point. All that was the problem was 4 flat tires. However, NASCAR told his team, okay, so the area they towed you to is the area where if you repair the car, you have to then take the car back to that area after you're done so you can then look at it again. But then if you take it back to that area, we have to park you.
Yeah.
And if that sounds like nonsense,
It is.
it is.
Yeah.
But that is exactly what Kyle Busch said. And they didn't even give him a chance to make minimum speed. So I don't know what in the world. Maybe it has to be a miscommunication because I don't see how, according to their rules, they could have parked Kyle Busch there. And that if that doesn't just sum up Kyle Busch in the Daytona 500, I don't know what does.
It may be some first race kinks with the new DVP trying to get all the officials and all the track members working under control.
Then surely err on the side of let the guy with only flat tires go back out on the racetrack.
Welcome to NASCAR.
Oh my gosh. Why can't we get through one race?
So
without...
you talk about a Kyle Busch wrecking out. Let's talk about that specific wreck. And Kyle Busch, I love his interview after the when he got out of the infield care center.
Or that was the Joey Logano wreck, not the Ryan Priest wreck.
Right.
My bad. Yeah.
So then he was talking about Joey Logano, and I just wanted to picture because I just interviewed Joey Logano. Now they're interviewing Kyle Busch, and Kyle Busch is talking trash about Joey Logano, and I just pictured him like 3 feet off camera, just looking at him. But let's talk about the wreck in general. So when Corey LaJoie, Ricky Stenhouse, and Joey Logano were running in that,
everyone knew
pack,
that was a crash.
Yeah, I turned to the guy next to me, never watched a 500. I said, I give it 3 laps before something breaks.
Yeah.
Maybe half a lap later something broke. But right, let's just dive into it. So Ricky Stenhouse throws a late block. Yes.
Shocker.
Yes, he does. Throws a late block. Then Joey Logano claims he lifted severely.
To be fair, I want to play devil's advocate here for Joey Logano.
Well, let me finish explaining it. Then
Okay.
you can. So Joey Logano claims he lifted. Ricky Stenhouse throws the late block, then gives him maybe what looked like an opening but wasn't an opening, and Joey Logano goes, "Sure, why not? Let's try it." Tried it, didn't work. Joey Logano blames Stenhouse. I haven't heard anything from Stenhouse. I'm sure he's not going to go, "Oh yeah, that was totally my fault."
I think it was Corey LaJoie.
Yeah, it probably was somehow.
He's
But
in front of everyone.
so let's hear about.
So, the view that I think is really informative for this is the Skycam view coming off turn 2 with their drone. You look and Stenhouse throws the block and then looks like he changes his mind about 6 times whether he wants to hold the block or not.
Yeah.
I think at that point it is Ricky Stenhouse's fault. You either make the block or you don't make the block. You can't sit there half on Logano's bumper and expect not to crash.
Yep.
Also, if you look behind Joey Logano, he has a bumper full of Noah Gragson. I think he is completely right when he says he doesn't have room to lift. Noah Gragson is down the tailpipe of the 22 in that moment. And so if I'm Logano and I have Noah Gragson pushing me up off the banking as Ricky Stenhouse is sitting on just the front corner of my car, of course that's going to be a crash.
Yeah, I don't think it's Joey Logano's fault or Ricky Stenhouse's fault.
I think it's Ricky Stenhouse's fault.
I think it's a little bit of both. But like you said, when Ricky Stenhouse throws the block, I think as soon as Stenhouse went to throw the block, I'm sure the spotter was in his ear saying not clear. That's probably when you got the, okay, I got to get back up here
he
before
did
I
it
cause
like
a
3
wreck.
more times. He's like,
And
I don't know what to do.
I think he went back up and went, oh, maybe I was clear. And was like, yeah, very indecisive.
And you cannot be indecisive with a block at Daytona.
Yeah, not when you're going 200 miles an hour 3 wide. You have to be precise and perfect. And first of all, the drivers were yesterday. They were 3 wide.
A lot.
And had very few incidents up until the end when they were actually allowed to race.
Well, I mean, other than the Toyotas, every car was handling pretty well. Other than the Toyotas and Kyle Larson.
Right. And speaking of handling, Denny Hamlin's save.
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
Shades of Kyle Busch and the Bud shootout that one time.
That was an incredible save down on the apron. But yeah, I don't think it's solely anybody's fault. I think it's a little bit of both. Possibly leaning more towards, I'd go 60-40, Stenhouse at 60.
Yeah.
But yeah, who's shocked? Are you shocked? Are you?
I
I'm
don't
not
think
shocked.
anyone is. No.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's shocked.
One thing I do want to say as well, I was one of my buddies was trying to get into NASCAR with this race. Shout out Sam if you're listening to this, but he was watching and he knew I had picked Kyle Busch going in, and I was like, Kyle Busch is the one in the 8 car, and after that wreck where Kyle Busch gets tagged and he's running third, I get a text from him. He's like, man, that was looking so good for Busch, and he didn't even do anything wrong. I'm like, welcome to super speedway racing, and welcome to Kyle Busch.
Welcome to Kyle Busch the last 2 years.
Yeah.
I mean,
when
started
even
in Bowman Gray this year, now the Daytona 500.
Yeah, when even a guy who's never really watched NASCAR knows that the guy was doing nothing wrong, just got junked. Yeah. It's bad.
Yeah, but that was the Daytona 500. The season is officially underway.
Yeah. Shout out to Hendrick Motorsports too for having a car to take back, even though they're leaving Byron's car because they got to take Byron's other car back.
Oh yeah, they did.
I don't think I've ever seen a team load a car from last year into the hauler leaving the track.
It's probably a great feeling if you're William Byron or just a team member at Hendrick Motorsports.
And the paint scheme upgrade.
Oh yeah,
Holy
I love
cow.
the new Exalta scheme.
The new Exalta scheme is absolutely incredible.
It's like a perfect mix of like the old school, or not old school, because I guess the old school would be the Rainbow Warrior, but like for our generation, the older
the Flames.
like Exalta Flames.
Someone teach 2311 how to do cool paint schemes again too. They've got it in their head that less is more, and so they keep taking color off the car. I feel like I'm watching F1 with the amount of just carbon on these things.
But they go to Atlanta next week. This is the same race that produced that crazy closest ever 3-wide finish in NASCAR. We were there.
And also Michael McDowell wrecking on pit road.
Yeah. So more super speedway action next week. Probably going to be 3-wide. We'll have an episode up Thursday this week talking about if we think there'll be fuel mileage racing, how we think the racing is going to play out, if there's going to be caution heavy, if they're going to be allowed to race, and who's going to win. So tune into that. But until then,
for the Ambetter Health 400
later, presented by Walmart.
Yes.